The monitor beeped steady and calm. That was the only calm thing in the room. Amara Whitfield lay back against damp pillows, her body still shaking from what it had just done. 2 babies. 2 tiny, screaming, perfect babies. 1 on each arm, their skin still pink from the fight of being born. The nurse was smiling. The doctor was smiling. Everyone in that room was smiling, except the man standing by the door. Marcus Delacroix Whitfield did not smile. He stood there in his gray coat like he'd walked in from a funeral instead of a birth. His jaw was tight. His eyes would not land on the twins, would not land on her. "Marcus," Amara whispered, voice cracked from hours of pushing. "Come see them. Come see your son, your daughter." He didn't move. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a thick cream envelope, walked to the bed, set it on the blanket, right next to their newborn son's tiny foot, like it belonged there, like it was a gift. "Sign these," he said. "It's over." The room went cold in a way no thermostat could explain. "Now?" Amara's voice broke into pieces. "Marcus, our babies just arrived. They're 20 minutes old." "I can't do this anymore." He said it flat, rehearsed, like a man reading off a cue card he'd practiced in his car. The nurse, a warm older woman named Odalis, stepped forward gently, holding the son out toward him. "Sir, would you like to hold him? Skin to skin helps." Marcus looked at the baby like it was a stranger's bag left at an airport. Something suspicious. Something he didn't want near him. "I can't," he said again, and turned and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut soft behind him, softer than a door slamming should feel, and somehow that made it worse. Amara sat there in the sudden silence, holding 2 lives that depended on her, staring at an envelope resting against her son's foot like a curse someone had left in the crib. She thought she'd lost everything in that moment. She had no idea what was sitting in her lawyer's inbox, 2 days old, worth $132 million. And she had no idea that the man who just walked out never bothered to read the very papers he made her sign 8 years ago. He thought he'd won. He didn't even know the game had already started. Let's rewind. Not far. Just far enough to understand how a woman holding twin newborns ended up staring at divorce papers instead of a bouquet of flowers. 8 years earlier, Amara was 26, sharp as a blade, building a skincare tech company out of a rented office in Charlotte, North Carolina, with 2 employees and a dream nobody believed in but her. Marcus was 31. Charming in that way rich boys from old Atlanta money are charming, like he'd been trained for it since birth. He swept in fast. Dinners, flowers, a ring within 11 months. Before the wedding, his family lawyer slid a prenup across a mahogany table. "Standard protection," Marcus said, barely glancing at it. "You know how families like mine do things." Amara read every page. Twice. Marcus signed his copy in under 4 minutes, more interested in his phone than the fine print that would one day decide his entire future. That carelessness would cost him more than he could ever imagine. The marriage started golden. It always does. But cracks don't wait for anniversaries. Amara's company grew, quietly, steadily. She kept it separate, held inside a trust her father set up before he passed, a habit of caution baked into her from childhood. Marcus's ego did not grow at the same pace as her success. He worked in real estate, comfortable, coasting on his family name. And every time Amara closed a deal, something small and ugly flickered behind his eyes. Then came the pregnancy. Twins. High risk. Amara on bed rest for months, swollen and exhausted and scared, needing someone beside her. Her older sister Ophelia moved in to help. Ophelia brought soup. Ophelia rubbed Amara's feet. Ophelia sat up late with Marcus while Amara slept, exhausted, upstairs. Ophelia was there for everything, except being loyal. The affair started in month 6. Amara didn't know yet. Marcus told himself it wasn't his fault. She's been distant. She's been consumed by the business. What was I supposed to do? Be alone? Men have been telling themselves that lie since the invention of guilt. He began planning something ugly in the quiet corners of his mind. He watched the calendar. He watched her belly grow. He decided, coldly, carefully, that the moment she was weakest, right after birth, exhausted and bleeding and vulnerable, that would be the moment he'd serve her. She'll be too broken to fight, he thought. She'll sign anything. He had no idea 2 days before those twins arrived, Amara's lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Vesper Adiemi-Cole, had finalized the sale of Amara's company to a national beauty conglomerate. $132 million. Locked inside the trust. Untouched by marriage. Untouched by Marcus. He served her divorce papers in a hospital room, 20 minutes after their children were born, thinking he was walking away from a woman with nothing. He was walking away from a woman who just became one of the wealthiest self-made entrepreneurs in the Southeast, and he didn't even know it yet. 3 hours after Marcus walked out, Vesper walked in. She didn't knock soft like the nurses. She pushed the door open like she owned the hallway, heels clicking against hospital tile, phone already in hand. Amara, her voice was gentle but urgent. I know this is the worst possible timing. I am so sorry, but I need 5 minutes. Amara looked up, twins finally asleep against her chest, tear tracks dried stiff on her cheeks. Vesper, The Lindquist group closed, officially, this morning. Vesper sat on the edge of the bed, taking Amara's free hand. It's done. It's real. $132 million, and every cent of it sits inside the Whitfield family trust, the one your father built. Nothing in that document has Marcus's name on it. Nothing. Amara stared at her. For a moment, the machines, the babies, the pain of childbirth, all of it went quiet, replaced by something sharp and clean cutting through the fog. He doesn't know, Amara whispered. He doesn't know, Vesper confirmed. And judging by the papers he shoved in front of you 20 minutes after your children were born, he's about to find out the hard way. Amara looked down at her son, at her daughter, 2 tiny chests rising and falling. Something inside her, something that had been trembling with grief only moments earlier, went still, went quiet, went cold in the way ice goes cold, not weak, but hard. He wanted to break me while I was weak, she said slowly. He doesn't know I've never been stronger. Vesper smiled, the kind of smile lawyers save for courtrooms they know they're going to win. Then let's not waste that. Marcus, meanwhile, was 3 miles away, sitting in Ophelia's condo, a glass of bourbon in his hand, feeling lighter than he had in months. You did it? Ophelia asked, curled on the couch, still in her silk robe. Signed, served, over. He took a long drink. She'll be too wrecked to fight it. Postpartum, exhausted, 2 babies screaming. She won't have the energy for lawyers. And the prenup? Ironclad. My family's lawyer built that thing before I even met her. He laughed, short and humorless. She gets a settlement. Maybe visitation on weekends. I get the house, the cars, and my life back. Ophelia curled closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder like she'd earned the right. And us? She asked. Marcus kissed the top of her head. Us we figure out once the dust settles. Neither of them noticed the black car parked across the street, or the man inside it with a long lens camera, quietly documenting everything for a private investigator named Roscoe Belfontaine, hired 3 months earlier by a woman they both underestimated. Back at the hospital, night settled in soft and blue through the window blinds. Amara sat up in bed nursing her daughter while her son slept in the little clear bassinet beside her, and for the first time all day, she let herself cry, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of everything crashing down at once. Her mother, Delphine, arrived just after 9, rushing in with her coat still buttoned wrong, breathless. Baby, I got here as fast as I could. Where is he? Where's Marcus? Gone, Amara said simply. Delphine's face crumpled. Gone where? Gone, Mama. He served me papers. In this bed. Right after they were born. Amara's voice cracked, but did not break. He wouldn't even hold them. Delphine sat heavy in the chair beside the bed, hand over her mouth, eyes wet. Lord have mercy, that boy. It's not just him, Amara said quietly, looking down at her daughter's small fist wrapped around her finger. Vesper's investigator found something else today. What? Amara hesitated. The words felt like glass in her throat. Ophelia. Delphine went very still. Your sister? She's been with him, Mama, for months, since I was on bed rest, since she was supposedly here helping me. The silence that followed was worse than any scream could have been. Delphine's hands trembled in her lap. Outside the window, Charlotte's skyline blinked its lights like nothing in the world had just shattered. How long have you known? Delphine finally asked. And here is where the story does something most stories don't. Amara didn't cry harder. She didn't fall apart. She looked at her mother with tired, steady eyes and said the sentence that would change the entire shape of what came next. 4 months. Delphine blinked. 4 months? Baby, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you leave? Because leaving loud gets you nothing, Amara said, voice low and controlled. Leaving smart gets you everything. She looked down at her children, at the 2 small faces that didn't know yet how much their mother had already fought for them before they'd even taken their first breath. I found the messages in February, Amara continued. I could have screamed. I could have thrown him out that night. But I was 7 months pregnant with twins, and I needed to think, not react. So I called Vesper. I moved the Lindquist deal forward. I built a wall around everything that mattered before he even knew there was a war. Delphine stared at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. Not the sweet girl who used to cry over spilled cereal, but a woman who had quietly, patiently, built a fortress while everyone around her thought she was drowning. You let him think he was winning, Delphine whispered. I let him dig, Amara said. Every step he took toward that hospital room today, he was digging his own grave. He just doesn't know it yet. 2 days after the twins came home to Amara's mother's house, because the marital home now felt like enemy territory, a courier arrived at Marcus's office downtown with a thick folder from Vesper Adiemi Cole's firm. Marcus opened it expecting a standard response to his divorce filing. What he got instead made his stomach drop through the floor. Photographs. Time-stamped. Him and Ophelia at a hotel on Peachtree Street in March. Him and Ophelia at a restaurant in April, her hand on his knee under the table, caught through a long lens from across the street. Text messages subpoenaed weeks earlier through a discovery request his own lawyer hadn't flagged in time. Screenshots of conversations that left absolutely nothing to interpretation. And clipped to the top, a single typed page from Vesper. Mr. Whitfield? For Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the prenuptial agreement you signed on June 9th, any party who initiates dissolution of marriage in demonstrable bad faith, having engaged in documented infidelity prior to filing, forfeits claim to marital assets accrued during the union and assumes primary financial responsibility for support obligations. We trust you are familiar with the document you executed. If not, we would be happy to walk you through it. Slowly. Marcus read it 3 times. His hands had gone cold. He had never read that clause. He had never read past page 4. He signed what his family's lawyer told him to sign, trusting a document he assumed only protected him. It had been protecting her the entire time. He picked up his phone and called his mother, voice shaking in a way it hadn't since he was a teenager who'd wrecked his father's car. Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know about this clause? There was a pause on the other end of the line. A pause just a little too long. A pause that told him everything before she even opened her mouth. Marcus, honey, his mother, Genevieve, said carefully. Let's not panic. We knew about certain provisions. We thought they'd never matter. You knew? His voice cracked. You and Beau helped me time this whole thing. You told me to serve her at the hospital. You said she'd be too weak to fight back. We didn't think she'd have proof of the affair and a business deal that big and a lawyer sharp enough to... Marcus hung up before she could finish. He sat alone in his office, the city lights of Atlanta glittering outside his window. The same lights that used to make him feel like a king. Now they just looked like 1,000 tiny eyes, all of them watching him understand, far too late, exactly how much he had lost, and how much of it he had lost by his own hand, guided by people who claimed to love him, but only ever loved his comfort. Because somewhere across town, a woman he thought he'd broken was sitting in a rocking chair, one twin on each side of her, already 3 steps ahead of every move he thought he'd made in secret. The war hadn't even started yet, and he had already lost. 6 weeks after the hospital room, Marcus sat in a lawyer's office that no longer felt like his own team's office. It felt like a room full of people quietly calculating how much of him could still be salvaged. His attorney, a tired man named Fenwick Ashworth Gray, slid the folder back across the table. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Marcus. The photos, the messages, the hotel receipts, it's airtight. And that clause you signed?" Fenwick tapped the paper. "It's enforceable. Bad faith initiation combined with proven infidelity before filing. You're not walking away with half of anything acquired during the marriage. And that company she just sold? Untouched. Premarital trust. Not even a conversation." "So what do I get?" Marcus's voice was smaller than he meant it to be. "You get what was already yours before the wedding, and you get to pay support." Fenwick paused. "Substantial support. Given the disparity in outcomes now, the court's going to look hard at what's fair for those children." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. "And custody?" Fenwick looked at him with something close to pity. "That's the part I'd worry about most. There's a nurse on record who says you refused to hold your own newborns 20 minutes after they were born. There's a hospital timestamp on when you served her the papers. Judges don't love reading a man's coldness laid out in a timeline like that, Marcus. It doesn't read like heartbreak. It reads like calculation." Across town, Amara sat in Vesper's office, twins napping in a double stroller beside her desk, milk-drunk and peaceful, completely unaware their mother was quietly rebuilding her entire life around them. "He's panicking," Vesper said, scrolling through an email. "Fenwick's basically begging for a settlement instead of trial. Doesn't want a judge to see the timeline in open court." "Good," Amara said. "Let him beg." "There's something else." Vesper turned her laptop around. Roscoe dug deeper into the family's side. "It wasn't just Marcus's idea to serve you at the hospital." Amara's jaw tightened. "Say it." His mother and his brother Beauregard knew about the affair since February. They didn't just know, they encouraged the timing. There are texts between Genevieve and Marcus talking about how she'll be too exhausted to fight back, and how the hospital moment would set the tone for negotiations. Vesper shook her head slowly. "They planned to humiliate you while you were literally holding your newborns, Amara. A strategy." For a moment, Amara said nothing. She looked over at the stroller, at her son's tiny fist curled against his cheek, at her daughter's soft breathing. "They thought I'd be too broken to notice," she said finally. "They saw a pregnant woman and thought victim. They never once considered I might be building something they couldn't touch." "You built a fortress while everyone around you was planning a funeral," Vesper said. "That's not luck, Amara. That's a woman who knows her worth even when nobody else does." Ophelia found out the money was never coming the way she expected it to. She'd pictured a different ending. Marcus, freshly divorced, wealthy, grateful, finally hers without guilt hanging over every kiss. Instead, she watched him unravel over 6 weeks, sleepless, snapping at her over nothing, drinking more than he used to, terrified of a court date creeping closer. "You said this would be simple," she hissed at him one night in his temporary apartment, a soulless rental he'd moved into after his mother suggested it might look better for him to seem independent during the divorce. "I didn't know about the clause," Marcus snapped back. "Nobody told me." "Your own mother helped plan this." "And now my own mother's lawyer is telling her not to say another word to anyone, including me, in case it makes things worse in court." He threw his glass into the sink so hard it cracked. "Do you understand what's happening? I might lose the kids. I might lose everything." Ophelia stood there in his kitchen, arms crossed, and for the first time allowed herself to really look at the man she'd betrayed her sister for. Desperate, cornered, already starting to blame everyone around him instead of the choice he made walking out of that hospital room. "I need you to understand something," she said slowly. "I didn't sign up to be broke and hated by my entire family for a man who can't even keep his composure." "So that's it?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "The second the money's not guaranteed, you're out?" "The second the money's not guaranteed," Ophelia said, grabbing her coat. "I remember I have a sister I destroyed for nothing." She left that night and never came back. Not out of love reclaimed, not out of guilt fully processed, but because the thing she'd actually wanted all along was comfort, and comfort had just walked out the door in the shape of $132 million she'd never get near. The court date arrived on a gray Tuesday in late autumn, the kind of sky Charlotte gets right before winter properly sets in. Amara wore navy blue, simple, sharp. Vesper sat beside her, calm as still water. On the other side of the room, Marcus sat beside Fenwick, his mother Genevieve 2 rows back, refusing to meet anyone's eyes, her presence there more obligation than support. The judge, an older woman named Honorable Perpetua Incem Dirham, moved through the case with the brisk efficiency of someone who had seen every version of this story before and was not moved by tears alone. Fenwick tried, valiantly, to frame Marcus's departure as heartbreak, as a man overwhelmed, as postpartum stress from an unexpected angle. But the timeline sat on the table like a loaded gun. The papers, time-stamped 22 minutes after the twins' birth, the nurse's sworn statement about him refusing to hold his children, the messages between Marcus and Ophelia, month after month, while Amara lay in bed unable to walk without help. And then came the clause. Vesper read section 14, paragraph 3 aloud, slow and clear, letting every word land in the silent courtroom. Bad faith initiation. Documented infidelity prior to filing. Forfeiture of claims to marital assets. Primary financial responsibility for support. "Mr. Whitfield signed this document 8 years ago," Vesper said, turning toward the judge. "He had every opportunity to read it, to question it, to understand it. Instead, he treated his own protections as an afterthought, and now asks this court to shield him from consequences he never bothered to understand." Judge Nkimidiram looked over her glasses at Marcus for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Mr. Whitfield," she said finally, "there is a particular kind of arrogance in signing a document without reading it, and an even greater kind in assuming it will never be enforced against you. This court does not reward that arrogance." The ruling came down 3 weeks later, and it was not the cartoonish, penniless collapse some might imagine, but it was devastating in every way that mattered. Marcus retained what he'd brought into the marriage, his original investments, his car, a modest condo his family had purchased outright years earlier. Nothing more. The wealth built and multiplied during the marriage years, none of it touched him. The Lindquist deal, the trust, the $132 million remained entirely and untouchably Amara's. He was ordered to pay significant monthly support for the twins, a number that would follow him for the next 18 years, a permanent reminder etched into every paycheck of the choice he made in a hospital room. Custody was decided not because of any prenup clause, but because of him, because of a documented pattern of absence, of refusal, of a father who had chosen, in the rawest moment of his children's existence, to turn away from them. Primary custody went to Amara. Marcus was granted supervised weekend visits, contingent on counseling, contingent on showing up, contingent on proving himself in ways he had never once had to prove himself before. Genevieve and Beauregard, exposed in open court for their role in orchestrating the hospital room ambush, found their family's reputation across Atlanta's social circles quietly, permanently altered. Doors that once opened easily now stayed shut a beat too long. Invitations stopped arriving. The kind of consequences that don't show up on a bank statement but cut just as deep. Ophelia disappeared from the family entirely, unable to face her mother, unable to face the sister whose kindness she'd mistaken for weakness. And Amara. Amara went home. 8 months later, the headquarters of Amara Whitfield's new venture, a wellness and skincare company built from the ashes of the Lindquist sale, now employing over 300 people across 2 states, rose 11 stories over downtown Charlotte, glass and steel catching the late afternoon sun like something alive. Marcus stood across the street. He hadn't planned to be there. He told himself he was just passing through, on his way to a meeting that would never quite materialize the way his meetings used to, back when his last name opened doors instead of raising questions. But his feet had carried him here anyway, the way grief sometimes walks you places your mind refuses to admit you wanted to go. Through the glass doors, he saw her. Amara, in a sharp cream blazer, twins balanced easily on each hip, nearly a year old now, faces round and bright, one reaching for her earring, the other laughing at something a passing employee said. Staff turned as she walked through the lobby, smiling, a few clapping softly, a warmth in the room that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with respect earned, not bought. His son laughed. His daughter reached her small hand toward her mother's face. Marcus stood frozen on the sidewalk, coat collar up against the wind, watching a life unfold behind glass that he'd once held in his own hands and thrown away without a second glance. Amara didn't see him. She didn't look for him. She didn't need to. She walked deeper into the lobby, into the light, into the sound of laughter and clapping, and two small children who would grow up knowing exactly what it looked like when their mother stood back up after being pushed down, and Marcus stood outside in the cold, understanding, far too late, that the papers he signed thinking he'd won had cost him the only thing that was ever truly valuable in the first place. Not the money. Her. Them. The family he chose to abandon in a room that still smelled like new life, because he mistook her exhaustion for weakness and her silence for surrender. He turned and walked away before anyone inside could see him standing there. No one did. He served her papers and refused to hold his own newborns, certain he had already won. He never understood that the woman he left behind wasn't broken. She was building, quietly, patiently. While he celebrated in another woman's apartment, she was laying the foundation for a life that would not need him. Amara Whitfield did not get revenge because she screamed the loudest or fought the dirtiest. She got her life back because she stayed calm when it mattered most, gathered proof instead of reacting in pain, and trusted that the truth, given enough time and enough patience, always finds its way to the light. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more real, raw, powerful stories of betrayal and redemption. Drop a comment telling me which part hit hardest, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that karma always, always finds its way home.